The valet barely looked at me as he took my 10-year-old Corolla the same way he'd just smiled at the Lexus in front of me inside the glass doors of Ara. Everything gleamed, gold chandeliers, ivory linens, wine glasses so thin they looked like they'd break under your breath. My mother's pick, of course she insisted their 45th anniversary be somewhere worthy of our family's legacy. I'm Briar Whitmore's second daughter, unmentioned daughter, the kind of daughter who gets invited out of obligation, and even then, barely, it was 6:58. The reservation was for 7, which meant my sister Sloane had already arrived perfectly. On time for someone who believes being late is a privilege reserved for the irrelevant. The Major D's eyes skimmed over my plain black dress, pausing a beat too long at the worn heel of my boot before softening with forced warmth. Whitmore party. Yes, I replied. Voice flat. Your sister said you might be joining us. Might be joining. The words didn't surprise me. They just confirmed what I already knew, that I was optional in their story. When I reached the table, tucked into a private corner, naturally Sloane was radiant in a crimson dress that probably cost more than I made last month. Her laughter sparkled louder than the glassware. She didn't even look up. Then she raised her champagne and said it to Eleanor and Paul Whitmore. Thank you for raising the most extraordinary only child a family could ask for. No one corrected her. Not one head turned toward me. But that night, I didn't come to be noticed. I came to end the silence. Sloane was always the dazzling one. Even as kids, people gravitated to her like she was lit from within. Ballet recitals, science fairs, student council elections. She didn't just participate, she dominated. And my parents, they followed her light as if it were the only one worth seeing. Meanwhile, I became the background blur in family photos. I wasn't shy, I wasn't difficult, I was just quieter. The kind of kid who built dollhouses out of shoeboxes and designed bedrooms in sketchbooks instead of asking for attention. When I turned 10, my parents missed my school's art showcase. Sloane had a tennis match the same day. We'll catch the next one, my dad said without looking up from his calendar. There was never a next one. In high school, I was accepted into an early college interior design program. I printed the acceptance letter, left it on the kitchen counter with a note that said, I did it. It sat there for 2 days before disappearing. No congratulations, no questions, just silence. My Aunt Lydia and Uncle Frank. Notice, though, they showed up to the student presentation with a bouquet and a proud smile. You're the real deal, kiddo, Uncle Frank whispered, squeezing my shoulder like it meant something. It did. At home, things got worse when Sloane started her marketing career. Every holiday was a highlight reel of her promotions, her awards, her campaigns. I once mentioned a restaurant I'd helped design, and my mother blinked like she hadn't even known I was working in the field. You're doing art, right? She asked vaguely, then turned to Sloane to ask about a billboard downtown with her face on it. I learned to shrink, to stop offering pieces of myself, only to watch them fall unnoticed to the floor. But I kept saving every freelance gig, every design consult, every weekend job. I tucked the money away, not because I owed them, but because I still hoped one day they'd finally see me. Not just tolerate me, not just remember me, see me. 7 years, $65,000. The envelope I carried into that dinner wasn't about money. It was about proof that I mattered, that I was worthy of being part of their legacy too. But something happened the moment Sloane made that toast. For the first time, I stopped hoping, and I started remembering the sound of clinking glasses surrounded me, soft laughter swelling like a rising tide. And still, no one looked my way. Sloane's toast had landed like it was scripted by a PR team, flawless, charismatic, untrue. And the most chilling part, no one seemed to care. Not my mother smiling with moist eyes, not my father, raising his glass like it was gospel. Even our relatives, people who had watched me grow up, just nodded, smiled, sipped as if I had never existed. I should have expected it. But expecting it didn't make it hurt less. I sat at the far end of the long banquet table, half hidden behind a decorative plant, like a misplaced prop. One cousin's boyfriend, who didn't recognize me, leaned over and asked, "Are you part of the Whitmore family too?" Before I could answer, the servers appeared with champagne flutes. The moment passed, like I wasn't even there. I felt the weight of the envelope in my purse pressing against my thigh. Thick, cream-coloured paper, chosen carefully, a symbol of years I couldn't get back. A symbol I once thought would buy belonging. I scanned the table again. The answer was painfully clear. No one here would ever choose to see me, but Lydia and Frank. They always had, sitting slightly apart from the table. Not out of exclusion, but because that's who they were. Quiet people who didn't need to perform for attention. I stood slowly smoothing the front of my dress. No one noticed. Conversations continued. My mother reached for her wine. My father checked his watch. Sloane had already started another story about an ad campaign with viral engagement. I walked the length of the room, not rushed, not theatrical, and approached Lydia and Frank. Aunt Lydia looked up, eyes widening. Uncle Frank set down his fork, mouth still full from a bite of sea bass. I placed the envelope gently on the table in front of them. "This is for you," I said, just loud enough for them to hear, just enough for the room to fall quiet. And it did. Conversations dropped like they'd been sliced mid-word. Sloane's laugh cut off. Mid-note, my mother's fork clinked against porcelain. For the first time all evening, everyone turned to look at me. Lydia's hand trembled as she touched the envelope. "Briar, what is this? Open it when you get home," I said. Voice steady, "I just wanted you to have it for everything." Frank's weathered hand covered mine, warm and grounding. "You didn't need to do this," he said softly. "You saw me," I whispered, and that was enough. I turned my eyes, brushing past my sister's stunned face, past my mother's frozen smile, past my father's blank stare. I didn't pause. I didn't explain. I didn't cry. The maitre d', almost as if summoned by an invisible cue, appeared with my coat as he helped me into it. I caught a glimpse of myself in the restaurant's gilded mirror. I stood taller than I ever had. I walked out into the Connecticut night, crisp, dark, absolute, and didn't look back. That was the moment the silence cracked, and something inside me began to roar by the time I got home. My phone had 17 missed calls. The timestamps marched backward through the night. 10:41, 9:16, 7:59, 6:03. My voicemail box blinked like a fire alarm, full of messages I already knew by heart before pressing play. The first one arrived just after I'd left the restaurant. My father's voice clipped. Clinical said, "You've embarrassed this family." 4 words, no greeting, no sign-off. Next came my mother, 2.5 minutes of breathless guilt, spinning. "How could you do this to us, Briar? After everything we've sacrificed for you in front of everyone." I didn't play the rest. I made tea instead, let the steam rise into the quiet of my apartment, while the phone vibrated over and over. I didn't answer, I just listened to the sound of the kettle boiling, the clink of porcelain. Real things, solid things at noon. Sloane sent a text. It was a screenshot, something I'd sent to Aunt Lydia 3 years earlier, during a breakdown that felt like it would never end. I had written, "Sometimes I want to scream until they finally remember I exist." Sloane's caption, "Clearly you've been unstable for a while, we're all very concerned." I blocked her number. Then I blocked our parents. The silence that followed wasn't painful, it felt clean. Aunt Lydia called around too, her voice was soft trembling. "We haven't opened the envelope yet, are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "You've always seen me, that's all it was." Ever for a pause, then Uncle Frank's voice came through the background, low and stunned. This is $65,000. You earned it," I said with kindness, with consistency, with showing up when no one else did. Aunt Lydia didn't answer at first, just a soft sound, somewhere between a sob and a laugh. "We always saw you, sweetheart. she said finally, even when they didn't. That night, I slept for 9 full hours. No panic dreams, no rehearsed arguments, just rest. When I woke, the clarity was immediate. Like a window had been opened in my chest, I sat down at my desk and wrote a letter. Dear Mum and Dad, I release you from the obligation of pretending to love someone you never really knew, and I release myself from the burden of trying to earn it. Please don't contact me again. I wish you peace, but I am done pretending. Briar, I clicked send and didn't look back. Then, I took down the photo frames from my living room wall, the ones with my mother's careful poses and my father's stilted smiles. I wrapped them in newspaper and boxed them up. History preserved, but no longer invited into my present day's past. The silence deepened, but unlike before, it didn't echo, it held me. It steadied me until one Sunday afternoon. A silver Lexus pulled into my driveway. It felt like a threat wrapped in leather upholstery. My parents stood on my porch like ambassadors of some fading empire. My mother wore a beige wool coat and her signature pearls. Her posture, straight expression composed. My father clutched a manila envelope like a shield. I recognized the maneuver when affection fails arrive with paperwork. They didn't knock. They waited for me to open the door. I did. You can come in for 20 minutes. I said I have a client meeting at 3, a lie, of course, but necessary. Inside, they looked out of place in the warm, curated comfort of my home. The hand-woven rug, the custom shelves, the walls filled with photos of friends, projects and memories that had nothing to do with them. My mother's eyes scanned everything, searching for signs of instability. My father remained stiff, briefcase still unopened. We brought some things you might want to see. He said. He began spreading photos on my coffee table. Baby pictures, school awards, a few blurry birthday shots. My mother perched on the edge of the couch. We've been thinking, Briar, about healing, about family, about finding a way forward. I said nothing, just went into the kitchen and began making tea. You haven't returned our calls, she continued, her voice trembling just enough to register as, concerned you called me when you needed to manage an image. I said, when was the last time you called just to ask how I was? She blinked, thrown off. My father shifted. I returned to the living room with the tea tray, setting it down beside their curated photo. Offering you always had support, my father snapped. Look at these moments, we were there. I pulled out my old paper calendar from a nearby drawer, edges worn from years of moving it around, never throwing it out. May 15th, 2010. My first solo design exhibit. I invited you. Carol drove 4 hours to be there. You RSVP'd? Yes. You never came. I flipped to the next tab. December 3rd, 2012. Emergency, appendectomy, the hospital, asked if I had next of kin to call. I gave them your numbers. Neither of you answered. Lydia stayed through the night. My father's face flushed. We had commitments. Your sister, I said, quiet but unwavering. I wasn't difficult. I just wasn't her. My mother began to cry. Real tears, but I had no energy left for performances, even hers. We can fix this, she said. We can go to counselling. Sloane agrees Sloane isn't welcome in this conversation. I interrupted, not anymore. My father rose. Anger swelling. We raised you. No, I said you raised Sloane. I raised myself. They stood there, 2 people who had once held all the power, but now they were just guests overstaying their welcome. I walked to the front door and opened it. I wish you peace, I repeated, but I need space. They hesitated, but they left. I closed the door behind them and stood still for a long moment, breathing in the quiet. Then I poured my tea. It had gone cold, but it tasted like truth. The morning after they left, everything felt lighter. The silence in my apartment wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. My phone was still quiet. No calls, no messages, but that silence no longer gnawed at me. It comforted me. It reminded me that peace isn't always soft. Sometimes it arrives like a door closing behind you. A few days later, Aunt Lydia called. We haven't touched the envelope, she said gently. But we've been thinking, would you be okay if we used some of it to start a scholarship for design students, kids like you? Frank's voice added in the background, only if your name's on it, if that's what you want. My throat tightened. Yes, I said I want that. The announcement came the next week in the local paper, the Briar Whitmore Design Scholarship established to support emerging artists who need help being seen. It was a quiet piece tucked between a winter festival ad and a pancake breakfast fundraiser. But to me, it felt louder than anything my family had ever said about me. Then came Maris, a design student. Young, soft-spoken, unsure, she showed up at my office, holding a worn sketch pad and a printed-out email from her advisor. I heard, you might be willing to mentor someone. Her designs were raw, emotional, brimming with promise. Tell me what you want. Your spaces to feel like. I said. She blinked. I don't know if I'm allowed to want anything. I just want to do it right. You're allowed, I said. You don't need permission to take up space. That became our first lesson. My apartment began to shift. Photos of Lydia and Frank went up on my walls, framed sketches from Maris snippets, from projects I once kept hidden, in case they seemed too bold. Now they were at the centre. One snowy evening, I hosted a winter open house. Nothing fancy, just cider cookies, and the kind of people who show up because they care. That night, I stood in my kitchen and looked around at faces that felt like family. No one asked about my parents. No one brought up Sloane. They didn't have to. We all knew why this gathering mattered. And in that warmth, with music, playing low laughter, spilling through my hallway, a tray of ginger cookies half devoured on the table, I realised something. I hadn't just left something behind. I had built something better. I didn't think peace would look like mismatched mugs and warm socks and laughter echoing down my hallway. But it does. It's the smell of cinnamon in Frank's old flannel. It's Lydia humming while she waters the plants. It's Maris beaming as she unveils her first commissioned piece. And it's me, not waiting to be invited into someone else's legacy, but building one with my own hands, not for approval, not to be noticed, just because I finally believe I deserve the space I stand in. It's been 3 months since that dinner. I still haven't heard from my parents. Not really. A few passive-aggressive holiday cards arrived, unsigned, unaddressed, just wishing you the best. I didn't open them, just filed them into the same drawer where I keep the hospital bracelet, the unopened RSVP cards, the memory of their silence. But my life, my real life, has never been louder. The scholarship launched its first cycle. Applications are already coming in. One from a girl who grew up in a foster home and draws architectural plans on napkins. One from a boy whose dad laughs at his love for colour palettes, but who still dreams of designing healing spaces for veterans. Every story feels familiar. Every voice echoes something I used to whisper into the dark. Please, let me matter. Now I get to answer you. Already due last week, I visited Maris's studio. She was standing in the middle of a partially painted mural, rich emeralds and deep copper lines, curling around the wall like vines. She turned to me and said, "It finally feels like my work is saying what I couldn't." And I knew exactly what she meant. The old family photos are gone, now replaced by frames filled with people who chose me, who welcomed me, who saw me without asking me to shrink. My walls aren't curated for approval anymore. They're layered with life, love, and light. Sometimes, when I water the herbs Lydia helped me plant on the windowsill, basil, rosemary, thyme, I think about that moment in the restaurant, how I'd planned to buy my parents' love, with $70,000 a handwritten letter and hope, and how instead I gave all of it to the only people who ever asked me how I really was, people who didn't need a perfect toast or a photo op to prove I belonged these days. I don't shrink from the word family. I just define it differently. Family is who shows up when it isn't convenient. Family is who sees you in the shadows and never looks away. Family is chosen. I didn't walk away because I was bitter. I walked away because I was finally ready to stop proving. I mattered, and the moment I did, I finally became someone I could believe in. I see me now. That's enough.